Welcome to Project Management 101. I'm Dave. I'm a senior project and program manager with over 15 years experience. I've worked in many organizations, helping many software teams deliver really complex software and website and wider technology projects and programs. Today, I want to talk to you about what I believe is one of the most important tools to help you on your journey as a new project manager or a project manager who's been on the journey for a longer time. The tool that I think is probably one of the most fundamentally important tools, but not necessarily the most well understood, is product-based planning. Now, this tool is really important for helping you get a project up and running and start to understand what are the components of the plan and how do you move it forward as quickly as possible to allow the teams to really start to deliver value for the business. Just before we get well into it, I want to start here. In 1873, Edmund Burke said, "There is no greater mistake a man can make than to do nothing because they could only do a little." I'd paraphrase and bring that up to date a little. Maybe it's less about a man and more about everybody in society, but I'm sure you get the vibe. Ultimately, I think product-based planning allows us to live and breathe by that principle of being able to make a start. And in any situation, the hardest thing to do is to start. We're not going to use any textbooks or anything today. We're going to dive in with some really easy examples to help you understand the concept and how you can put it into practice a little bit later on. I think reflecting on the words of Edmund Burke then, let's make a start. We're going to start with the simple picture of a hovercraft. So looking at this picture, we can start to visualize it. We might have a thought in our mind about what that looks like already anyway. So now we can visualize the hovercraft in its end state. It helps us to make a more tangible picture in our mind, and we can then start to think about how do I put all the parts together. So that's the concept of product-based planning, and we use this to visualize the end state and then think about the component parts that make it up to be able to build a plan from the bottom up and then start to add the detail to the plan. And then ultimately we get to a very clear plan with a number of steps that we need to execute to be able to get to that end state. So that's the principle of product-based planning. I'm hoping that's really helpful for you. Now, we're going to dive in a little bit as an exercise and break these down. We can pause the video here if you like. And if you want to follow along, just pause here, make your own list, drop it in the comments. I'd be delighted to see it. I'm going to break down the list as I see it. So when I'm thinking about breaking it down, I'm going, there's a fan for lift, there's a fan for thrust, I've got a chassis, that could be a monocoque chassis, it could be a multi-piece chassis, I've got a rudder for steering, I've got a steering mechanism to bring that to life, I've got a skirt, I've got an engine or a motor of sorts, I've got a throttle mechanism in order to be able to get it to move. Maybe it needs some lights if you're going to operate it in the dark. Maybe for the fan, it needs a shroud so people don't get injured. Probably need somewhere to sit, so a seat, some electrical wiring to maybe put it all together, some gauges so I know how fast I'm going in, if I've got some fuel, a fuel tank, a fuel system. The list could go on. I'm not an engineer by any stretch of the imagination, so please don't go and build a hovercraft based on this list. You probably need more than that, but you get the picture. It's the concept that we're talking about to support our theory of product-based planning. So yeah, please don't go and build any hovercrafts. So this list forms the initial basis of our plan. Now we've got that list, every part of that list will have a subset of components. So being able to have a look at the list of components and then break them down to go, oh, I need to build a seat. So I probably need a seat frame. I need a seat cushion. I need something to cover the seat. I need a way of pinning it all together. I maybe need a way of fixing it to the hovercraft. They're all subcomponents that we need to develop and would all have their own lead time, which ultimately we could describe as a project. So this starts to build out our subsection of items that we want to understand the plan timeline for in order to be able to build our holistic plan. So understanding each of the sub-components and their delivery timescales or their planned timescales or their manufacture timescales allows us to build out a longer-term view in terms of all of the components that we need to deliver the hovercraft, which is ultimately the project. So I'm hoping this is all starting to click into place for you now. This was one of the realizations I had. Now we've got that list, ultimately the stages of the project would run into, well, what's the design look like? So for a hovercraft, we probably want an AutoCAD design. We might want a engineer to be kind of pulling together what is the design for the hovercraft. In a software project, we might think about what's a high level design, what's a kind of low level design. We might think about things like wireframes. So what does the end state of a software application or a website look like? And it just allows us to visualize those steps. And that's really important, a bit like thinking about the hovercraft. So when we apply that here, we're thinking about the hovercraft, but when you take this into real world scenarios, you might think about it a little differently, and anything could be an end state. So building on that list, we now have a very comprehensive list of parts. Each one of those will need its own detailed design, and equally it will have its own timeline. Capturing all of that detail allows you to build your holistic view, which ultimately will form the project plan. At this point, with this list, we might want to start thinking about how we pull it all together and the way that we flow the plan. The longest lead time might be the thing that we need to think about starting today, and therefore something that's going to take 6 to 12 months, we need to start now, versus something that's only going to take 3 months. We probably want to start in 6 months' time, maybe 9 months' time, depending on how critical it is to bring the hovercraft to life. The way that I would do this in the real world, and the way that I'd recommend that you do this in the real world, as a project manager, you don't know all of this stuff, and that's perfectly fine. But your subject matter experts will be able to help you, and part of your role as a new project manager, or if you're experienced, it's about pulling together your team and understanding, okay, great, what are the steps, what are the components, how do they plumb together, what's the kind of dependency as the language that we'd use between each step, and what's then the flow of work to make sure that we maximize delivering our value, i.e. the hovercraft, to a customer or whatever the kind of end state is, as early as possible. This is the core process for implementing this in the real world, and thanks for sticking with me this far. When we think about the biro pen, it's a really great way of visualizing this in a much more simple form. So if we think we've got a plastic sleeve, for example, then inside the plastic sleeve, there's another plastic sleeve that contains some ink. That then goes into a little bit of metal, and then in the end of that, there's a little ball that helps the ink release. That all fixed together, and then there's a little plastic cap on top and a little lid. So we've started with the end state. We've been able to break down those components. So thinking about that plastic biro, you could take it to another level. Think about something more luxurious. How about a metal pen clip? How about a nice retractable mechanism, or one of those clicky tops? The list goes on. I'm sure you can start to bring it to life like I do when I'm thinking about product-based planning, so I really hope you do. Think about anything around you. A bottle of cola, a pencil sharpener, a candle, all of these can have the same product-based planning principles applied to them, and that's really important. The way that we collaborate with our team and pull each other together and use this as a framework to be able to have that conversation allows us to understand the detail and build together those collaborative plans. Using the product-based planning approach allows us to build up that plan and its estimates from the bottom up. That's really important. We'll cover this in more detail in future videos. I really hope that you enjoyed this video and you're going to be able to use it in your daily lives. I really enjoyed making it. Please give me a like if you got some value from this video, and I hope you consider subscribing for future project, program and delivery management videos, where I'll focus in on many areas based on my extensive experience. Also appreciate any comments if you want to make any suggestions around topics that you'd like covered, and I'll try and create some content that will allow you to get the best out of the channel. That's all for now. I hope you have a really great day. It's been great to have you all with us. Bye.